This is Radio Chatskill. I'm Tim Bruno. Salumi, not to be confused with salami, is the Italian word for charcuterie. Salumi includes raw, cooked, and cured meats. Examples include sausage, pancetta, and prosciutto. And in Italy, that's typically found at a La Salumeria. But there's also one in Hurleyville, La Salumina. Erin Shearer debuts a new recurring segment this morning called Eating Upstate, and she tells us more about our very own local Salumeria and the couple behind it.
According to Wikipedia, I know. A Salumeria is a retail store that sells cured meat products like salami and prosciutto, as well as other foodstuffs like pasta and spices. In some cases, there's even a place to sit down and eat. Here's Eleanor Friedman explaining the concept.
I mean, it's a concept that really doesn't exist in the States too much, but really a classic Italian salumeria. Somehow that here has gotten translated into like a pork store, or people use the terminology delicatessen, but it's sort of different. I mean, it's hard to you just kind of have to live it to know what the difference is.
Eleanor Friedman met Gian Piero Pepe outside of a bar in Siena, Tuscany in 2013. 18 months later, they relocated to New York City, where Eleanor grew up. They got married and worked in restaurants like Del Posto, Reynard at the Wythe Hotel in Brooklyn, and the Dumbo House. But Eleanor wanted to make salumi, and no one who was hiring shared Eleanor's rigid ethics from a sourcing perspective. So she decided to strike out on her own.
I would have been happy running somebody else's, but I couldn't find anything that seemed like the right fit, or somebody that was running an operation that had as gung-ho ethos as I did it with respect to sourcing from the meat to all of the ingredients. And if I wasn't going to be able to work somewhere that I was like 100% happy with that, then it didn't make sense for me to do it at all. And that was, I think, the origin of us talking about doing something together. And it was like, it was going to be both of us, then it was going to be me, then it was going to be both of us. And it was, it went back and forth, and it ultimately was sort of an organic evolution of us ending up doing it together.
They held underground suppers, catered parties, and began to look for a retail space in the city.
Yeah, we did these like tasting menus. So it would be like a 4-course tasting menu that would be like nose to tail pork dinner, but it wouldn't necessarily be like super meat heavy, but there would be accents.
But they were unable to find a space they could afford in New York City, so they decided to start looking upstate. First, they looked in Columbia County, where they had friends. Then someone alerted them to a retail space located in Hurleyville. They checked it out and fell in love. In the fall of 2019, they relocated to Hurleyville, and La Salumina opened the following April in the midst of the pandemic. According to Eleanor, all of their initial sales and customers were in the metropolitan New York City area.
We were offering curbside pickup, and I really think one of like the handful of first places that started doing like grocery delivery. We had no connections to anybody up here. So we launched our website with options to do home deliveries in Manhattan and Brooklyn. And originally 100% of our sales were in the city. And we were just driving around door to door, dropping stuff off, which was doable because there was no traffic because everyone was on lockdown. And it was really nuts because, I mean, we launched our website and within like 2 minutes we had orders coming in. And I was talking to a friend of mine who works in tech, and he was like, that's not a thing. Like, that's not, but it was just, we were like one of the first people that did it for Manhattan and Brooklyn, like period, of anybody. And which I think maybe because we didn't have an existing business yet. And so we were like, well, if we're going to open, we got to open this way. And we just like jumped on it really fast. So that was crazy. And then we slowly started having more people up here, building up inventory, kind of like feeling the things out. We were offering like veggie boxes and stuff that were sort of like a non-committal CSA to provide a service for stuff that people really weren't able to get during that time. And these were products that we weren't even really making money on. It was more of a service, like a community serving. And people were dying when we were delivering stuff to them. They were like, we haven't seen fresh stuff, blah, blah, blah. I mean, so it was kind of crazy and cool in a way. It wasn't what we were planning on doing at all, but it was the right thing. And
in February of 2021, they received preliminary approval from the USDA that enabled them to begin producing salumi and charcuterie, and their retail operations finally began to grow locally.
It wasn't what we were planning on doing at all, but it was the right thing. And then we just slowly started letting in one party at a time and evolving. And then we added sandwiches and started moving back into this thing. And we really started operating our business a little bit more along the lines of what we were planning this past spring with integrating the curing, which was what we were supposed to be doing, the dry curing of the products, the salami, the pancetta, and all of that stuff, being able to properly package stuff so we can wholesale to be able to actually have a brand that wasn't hodgepodged together. We weren't allowed to vacuum seal anything before. It was, everything the labeling was all different. Everything was just we had to just do things as we could because everything was so backed up.
In addition to salumi, they also sell Italian foodstuffs selected by Gian Pero. Some of what they sell is even difficult to find in New York City, so they get orders from all over the country.
Giampiero does more of the Italian sundry sections and uses me as a sounding board. And it's really been kind of a building. We have so many more products than we had when we first opened. We basically had nothing when we opened compared to now. It was also getting a feel for what people were wanting as well. And what we've noticed is people really do want true Italian products that are hard to find, that you can't get elsewhere. And so we'll get people ordering some of our products from across the nation because there's not a lot of people carry them. So it's about, I think in terms of the Italian section, it's about authenticity, quality, and then also something interesting and creating and being able to offer an experience that someone couldn't otherwise get elsewhere, or at least not easily.
Eleanor selects the cheeses sold in the store made by producers like Parish Hill Creamery and affineurs like Brooklyn's Crown Finish Caves. The meat used to make their salumi products comes from sources like Climbing Tree Farm and Kinderhook Farm in Columbia County. They stock cider from Wayside Cider in Delaware County, as well as Wurtsboro's legendary Aaron Burr cider.
We try and have a mix of American farmstead cheeses and supporting local producers that are doing a good job, like Parish Hill Creamery or Crown Finish Caves, that they're ofteners, not just, but they're ofteners as opposed to producers, which means they age the cheeses as opposed to making them, which is an age-old tradition. And then also mixing in imported French, Spanish, Italian cheeses. We always have a little bit of Italian bent. And because our store is so small and our case is so small, we try and rotate a lot. So you could get something 2 times. We keep the pillars of always have a 36-month Parmigiano Reggiano because it's the king of Italian cheeses. We always have mozzarella. We always have pecorino romano, so great for pasta. We have a truffle pecorino. So it's a young pecorino, young sheep's milk cheese with whole truffles shaved into it. So we have these staples, and then we have essentially, we think of it as slots. So we like to always have a blue cheese, but we'll rotate it so that you can get something different, that it's not always the same. And we'll come back around, but depending on what cheeses have seasons, things are looking good at different times. And so we have relationships with producers and distributors, and we really like to have that conversation. And then we always will have a soft goat. We like to have 1 or 2 stinky wash rind cheeses, a couple bloomy rind cheeses, and not necessarily we don't carry a brie. But if someone asks for it, we can say, well, we don't have that, but why don't you try this robiola, for example? It's going to be ooey and gooey and creamy and hit all the same notes, but you get to try something different. But then if they come back the following week, there's a good chance we won't have that. And we'll say well, we don't have the robiola, but why don't you try this Trillium from this American producer in the Midwest, or, insert different things here. And that way it also keeps it interesting for our customers and for us. The farms we work with are really mostly Climbing Tree and Kinderhook are both in Columbia County, as opposed to over here. These are folks that we've worked with for a long time. We didn't want to dump them just because we were ending up on the other side of the river, but also there's not a lot of, in terms of logistics of getting stuff from one place to another, there aren't really a lot of different companies. And so there's this guy that has delivered just down in the city, that delivers to the city from the slaughterhouse that these farms go to. And his company's actually based in Andes. So him going from there down to the city, he passes us on the way back anyway. So we don't even feel bad about food miles or anything because, it's maybe 5 minutes out of his way going back. So it still feels okay.
Recently, I had an opportunity to visit La Salumina after hours. Eleanor showed me the operations and the equipment they use to make their charcuterie and salumi.
So this is where we process all the animals. That door that you see there is our raw refrigerator.
Okay.
So that's where we keep all of our raw products. There's another half behind it, looks exactly the same, where we keep our ready-to-eat products. And then just down in that corridor, a handful, 3 specialized sort of refrigerators for making salami and curing them. And then this is going to be, but we still have one little thing to do. And you can kind of see maybe better. I'll turn the light on. Right now it's being used as storage, but you can see it from this side. Right now it has storage, but we're just finishing up the edging, and then this one's going to be another curing room that you'll be able to see you'll be able to see products hanging from the store. But COVID kind of put a wrench in all of the construction, and so construction always takes longer than you think, but then when you throw a pandemic in it takes longer than you think. So it's exponentially. And then we have a teeny tiny kitchen that's just behind this that's not very exciting at all. And that's the whole space.
Okay. So, as you can see, La Salumina is located on 210 Main Street in Hurleyville. Online at La Salumina, New York. I'm Erin Shear.
And Erin will bring us other Eating Upstate segments in the future.